No, absolutely not.
Oh, come on.
This is already way too complicated for me to spend all this time learning how to play it.
What did you think this was going to be?
I don't know, you told me there were pretty girls in it. I was tricked.
There are pretty girls in it.
Hey, you know how cosmic horror as a genre was built around one man's fear that miscegenation was going to ruin the world? Just something interesting to think about.
Well, maybe this handy video that I took will convince you.
Please tell me you're joking.
For once in my life, no.
This is over an hour long.
You like hanging out with me. This is just that edited.
And Jesus, that editing quality. What, did you just like not know how to use your audio recorder?
Yeah, but at least I look great.
How long did this take? This must have taken at least like 20 hours.
Oh wow, I wish it only took me 20 hours.
You are really into this, huh?
And here I was worried I was being too subtle about it.
What kind of a game could possibly be worth putting all of this time and effort into like just talking about it?
Well,
oh, no.
I'm glad you asked.
Arkham Horror is a 1987 board game published by Chaosium based on the role-playing game Call of Cthulhu. No. Sorry, no, that's not right. Yeah, sorry, that's actually a different game with the same name. Sorry about that. Off to a good start here. Let me try again. Arkham Horror is a 2005 board game published by Fantasy Flight Game. No. No, that's right. Sorry. That's actually it's another game with the same name, even published by the same company as the one I'm talking about. That's so confusing. Oh my gosh. Oof. Okay, this is embarrassing. Okay, let me try it one more time. I've got it this time. Arkham Horror is a 2018 board game published by Fantasy Flight. Jesus Christ! Right! Arkham Horror, the card game, as distinct from any of the Arkham Horror board games, is a living card game produced by Fantasy Flight Games from 2016 with expansion cycles continuing to be released into the present. It is a 1 to 4 player cooperative adventure horror card game based in no small part on the works of H.P. Lovecraft and his contemporaries, because his stuff is in the public domain, and nerds can't get enough of those properties for some goddamn reason. The game is sold in a non-randomized series of packs, each of which contain a few player cards and a scenario, which is basically like a level. Before each scenario, players construct a deck out of an available pool of player cards, and then use those decks to try to stop the world from ending or some other spooky shenanigans to happen. There's a lot of things that can happen in this game. The living card game is a distribution model invented by Fantasy Flight Games in which one core game is sold with a regular cycle of expansions coming out afterwards, with a non-randomized set of cards in each expansion. So if you buy this expansion, you know exactly what's in it. Contrast this with something like Magic the Gathering, where every single pack that's sold is randomized and you have no idea what you're going to get. In a living card game, you never have to chase rares, and if you buy one copy of every expansion, you'll have every card that's released in the game. Although that would still be like an absurd amount of money, and I definitely don't know anyone who would do that. Anyway, let's move on. Fantasy Flight has released a number of other LCGs. They have a Star Wars one, a Game of Thrones one, a Marvel one, basically any IP they can get their hands on. I've never played any of the others because they're mostly not cooperative, and I only play cooperative board games because I am an Aries, and we are famously averse to conflict. Anyway, let's move on, please. Not every LCG is a Fantasy Flight Games product, but most of them is, and I realize that's going to make it sound like I'm going to just be shilling for one company and their business model for free without getting paid for this whole video, that's pretty much what this is going to be for the next 7 hours. So I think we should probably all just get used to that going in. Anyway, let's move on! The game is a part of Fantasy Flight's Arkham Files IP, which covers a broad swath of games, all of which have the same setting, universe, and many of the same characters. Again, none of those are games that I've played. It takes place in the town of Arkham, Massachusetts, a fictional city native to Lovecraft's work, as investigators try to battle eldritch horrors and creatures of the darkness that threaten the existence of the universe with alarming regularity. While much of it is based on H.P. Lovecraft's original text, many efforts have been taken to scrub the racism from it with mixed results. Seriously, why do we keep trying to adapt this stuff? The Arkham Files IP, much like everything else Lovecraft-based that's come out since Call of Cthulhu, is much more pulpy than the original text. It regularly features action scenes of fighting off monsters with like Tommy guns and stuff. In another big change from the original texts, Sometimes in these ones, the investigators actually win. Honestly, it's maybe less accurate to call them horror games than to call them action-adventure games with, a smattering of monsters and dead bodies and stuff. The IP contains a number of repeated playable characters, each of which have their own little subtitle, like Daisy is the librarian and Rita is the athlete. It's cute. They do an okay job at making them reasonably diverse relative to a lot of other board games in the field, but all of the women are young and no one is fat or disabled, you coward. The Arkham Horror LCG core set premiered in 2016 with a full slate of expansions planned and about one expansion per month being released afterwards. Each pack contains one scenario along with a handful of player cards to be implemented into player decks. The core set contains 3 scenarios, and all expansions released afterwards are organized into 8 scenario cycles, with each pack being released at the beginning of the cycle serving as a deluxe expansion with 2 scenarios in it. So in order to play one of the expansions, you need the deluxe expansion that is packaged with, and in order to play the deluxe expansion, you need to have the core set. Each cycle takes about 8 months to complete, and at time of recording we are working our way through the 5th cycle. The game premiered at a convention to a sold-out crowd and has since attracted something of a cult following with a strong showing on a number of forums. There's a laundry list of awards, including basically every Golden Geek Award from 2016. BoardGameGeek.com ranks it at about 32,000 users owning a copy of this game. Compare that with something like Settlers of Catan, which has 132,000 users. So if you think about a quarter of the size of Settler of Catan's audience, that's a respectable size within this sub. I was introduced to this game in late 2017 by my friend Walker, who brought me into his group, and we played the first scenario in the Dunwich Legacy cycle, and I've been hooked ever since. Walker, if you're watching this, thank you for introducing me to this game. It's all I do now, and I now have to spend hours writing, recording, and editing video of me telling people about it. It's like The Grudge, except that I don't get to be free at the end. How could you do this? I played with that group until I decided to buy a copy of the game of my own, at which point I realized that the game plays one player, and there was nothing stopping me from just playing it all the time constantly, which I did, both to the amusement and to the irritation of my roommates. Since then, I have just purchased the rest of it, all of it, piece by piece, or more often, had whoever I was dating at the time buy it for me. Thanks, Chris, Anna, and Corin. I would like to say that I had some strong argument that I'm making here in this video, but the honest truth is just that I love this game, and I spend a lot of time thinking about it, and I wanted to talk about it for a while. So I'm going to talk about the Arkham Horror card game for a while, and you can watch that.
Cool, great. In Arkham Horror, you play as one of a number of wives.
Some of the characters, as you may suspect, are actually printed as men, but one of my friends who I got into this game made gender-swapped versions of all of the male characters because we've spent way too long in our lives playing men to have to continue doing it in our card games, and you can't stop us. You're not my real dad.
The characters each have a different backstory, different stats that make them good at different things, a special ability for each of them, some special cards which go into their decks, and a different set of cards they can choose from when they're building their decks. It's a totally different experience playing each character, and they all have a lot of personality. Choosing which investigator you play is one of the biggest decisions you'll make in the whole game, but most people I know just choose whichever one they think is the hottest the first time they play. I did that. This is Zoe. She hears voices from God telling her to kill people.
We're in love.
The core game comes with 5 investigators, and each deluxe pack afterwards comes with 5 or 6 more, plus a couple of variants who have been released with novellas that I haven't purchased. There are 5 factions in the game, and all player cards are either in one of those 5 factions or neutral. Also, there are a few multi-faction cards, but we don't need to get into those now. Each investigator is a certain faction and can only take cards from certain factions. Zoe, for example, is a Guardian faction and can take any Guardian cards as well as 5 cards from any other faction. They're also color-coded for your convenience. Guardians, blue, are all about killing monsters with some leadership and support features. I have several friends who tease me about Guardians being cop cards, and that's very upsetting to me, but also fair. There are social justice concerns with this game that we will get into. Seekers, yellow, are about looking for clues, but they're also good at drawing cards and moving around the board. Seekers tend to be academic types, very brainy. Mystics, purple, are the magic users. They like to break the rules and mitigate the effects of scary things on the field. They are, predictably, spooky wizard types, mostly. Survivors, red, are good at failing up and at turning small hands and low resource pools into strengths, and they also play a lot with digging around in their discard piles. They tend to be drifters and dark horses. And finally, rogues, green, are good at sneaking, stealing, and buying their way into success, and they're also very good at getting bonuses on critical successes. They tend to be criminals and rich people. There are three kinds of cards: events, assets, and skills. Events are cards where you play them and then they happen, they do the thing described on the card. Assets are cards that you play and then they stay on the field, having an effect until a scary card gets rid of them. And skill cards are cards which you discard to give you a special boost to a skill test. Most decks are 30 cards, and you usually want about 12 assets, 10 events, and 8 skills just to have all your bases covered. A lot of assets take up slots, which are these little icons. So you have 2 hand slots, 1 accessory slot, 2 spell slots, and 1 ally slot, because as everyone knows, you can only have 1 friend at a time. And there are ways of buying more slots, but for the most part, these are slots which are going to be conflicting with each other. But the cards that take slots tend to be really, really good. So when you build the deck, it's a pretty big question of whether you want to take Himbo or Sugar Mommy, or do you take both of them just to make sure you draw at least one, but then if you do draw one, then you draw another, it's just wasted deck space, and so on and so on. So you end up picking a few vital cards, and then you build the rest of your deck with the strategies around those. In addition to all the cards you pick up for yourself, though, you also get a weakness, because it's Arkham Horror and everything needs to be a little bit scary, including drawing your own cards. Each investigator gets their own weakness, which goes somewhere in their deck, and if you draw it, it does something terrible, like maybe it spawns a monster or does a bunch of damage to you or something. Almost always, it's designed to be perfectly annoying to that investigator specifically. But in addition, every deck also gets one random basic weakness, which could do anything from lose you some money, to making your skills worse, to straight up just goddamn killing you. Oh, goddamn!
I want to talk about the Forgotten Age.
This is maybe a good time to mention that the art team on this IP is absolutely legendary. I mean, look at these. Look at Leather Coat, or Heroic Rescue, or Uncage the Soul, or Slip Away, or Haunted, or Warning Shot. I mean, I don't even use Warning Shot, but I always want to, because look at it. And how are you even supposed to visually represent the idea of having something worth living for? Imagine being the art team and getting that instruction. Who knows what you're supposed to do, but they went and did it. The art is consistently beautiful, and the graphic design matches. There's all these little touches, like how the space where your investigators' abilities are listed are different for each faction, like with Guardians it's a notepad, and with Seekers it's a book. Just that kind of little touches throughout the design really sells the tone and makes the game look incredible.
The art in this game has the advantage of being shared with a number of the other Arkham Files IPs, with art from those games, from Mountains of Madness, the board game, Eldritch Horror, things like that, finding their way into this game, as well as art from this game eventually finding its way into other Fantasy Flight games as well. In addition to being cool to see art from one game reused in a different context in another way, it's also a nifty way of saving on the art budget, especially when you're producing the mammoth amounts of art that this game is. I want to reiterate that this game is putting out dozens of pieces of art every month at minimum, while consistently maintaining high enough quality on them that I'm always just a little bit away from just like ordering a billion prints. Although, if you pre-order scenarios, they do come with prints.
A lot of the cards have fun little bits of flavor, like a lot of the unique assets have these little subtitles, like All of McBride, Will Try Anything Once, or Chthonian Stone, Stygian Waymark, or Strange Solution, Untranslated. Wait, untranslated? I wonder what that means. Oh well, I'm sure it won't come up again, and even the flavor text of the cards is often a lot of fun.
Mr. Potterson always told Wendy things would turn out okay. But then again, Mr. Potterson was a teddy bear, and he didn't know any better.
I was born in Mississippi. Louisiana just sounded better.
There's nothing in the headlines about the horrors you've witnessed, but the obituaries section is disturbingly long.
What if you are the cat?
Okay, how many of these cards are there? Holy...
That's the worst plan I've ever heard. Well, what are we waiting for?
You must invest yourself in every spell, sometimes literally.
You can't buy happiness, but you can buy pretty much everything else.
Don't worry, I have this completely under control.
Some of the cards even reference or are referenced by other pieces of text, like there's a story moment in the Forgotten Age which offhandedly mentions Dr. Ellie Horowitz as being your researcher contact at the Miskatonic University. Just a lot of little touches like that which keep the world feeling consistent and cohesive. Okay, so you've chosen your investigator and you know which cards you're allowed to use, so now it is time to build your deck. This here is the real game. You go through the collection looking for all the cards that you think are good or good enough for that character or which match which you think you want to do with the deck, and you pull all those out, and oh dear, that is twice as many cards as you're allowed to have in your deck. So, okay, you go through and you winnow down the assets which share slots, and then you look at how much each card costs to play and try to make sure your deck isn't too expensive or too cheap, and then you try to balance your assets, events, and skills and take out redundant cards, and oh, look at that, you still have 4 too many cards, and it turns out you just have to cut some really important cards that you don't want to cut. Honestly, this is the hardest part of the game.
But okay, you've made all of your hard cuts and you have the leanest, meanest decks that you can think of, but wait, are you playing with a friend? Because if so, you'd better make complementary decks. If you don't have the tools to handle it when a monster does, you better make sure that they can.
The core set comes with 5 investigators, but if you're playing 2-player, there are 10 investigator combinations to choose from, and it only gets denser with every gator you add. Which girlfriends are going on this adventure?
And even if you're playing solo, you don't actually have to play solo. You could play with just you controlling 2 or 3 investigators if you wanted to, since it's cooperative. If you want to go really out there, you could even play 4-handed, as it were, and control all 4 investigators. Although that would be very complicated, and there would be a lot to keep track of, and only a nerd would do something like that, even though it would probably give you much greater control over deck synergy and play strategy. Anyway, let's move on. But once you've got your final setup, you're ready to take these perfect friends out to die horribly.
So this little book reads you an intro.
You and your partners have been investigating strange events taking place in your home city of Arkham, Massachusetts. Over the past few weeks, several townspeople have mysteriously gone missing. Recently, their corpses turned up in the woods, savaged and half-eaten. The police and newspapers have stated that wild animals are responsible, but you believe there's something else going on. You are gathered together at the lead investigator's home to discuss these bizarre events.
And then tells you how to set up the scenario. There are these little decks up here with more story on them.
Agenda 1A. What's going on? It is late at night. You're holed up in your study, researching the bloody disappearances that have been taking place in the region. A few hours into your research, you hear the sound of strange chanting coming from your parlor down the hall. At the same time, you hear dirt churning, as if something were digging beneath the floor. Act 1A, Trapped. As you leap to investigate, the door to your study vanishes before your eyes, leaving behind only solid wall. You're trapped inside your study until you can find another way out.
This one tracks the plans of the forces of evil. It's the agenda deck. This one tracks your goals. It's the act deck. Put them together and look. It's a little book. Isn't that cute? Everybody starts out by drawing 5 cards and mulliganing whichever ones they don't want. Everybody also starts with 5 of these tokens, resources. These are money, and you spend them on cards, and you get one of them each turn. There are lots of tokens. These are damage and horror. They hurt your health and sanity tracks just like any other game with damage. You're pretty fragile in this game. There's these things. They're clues. Your goal is to get as many of them as possible to advance the act deck. On the back, though, is Doom, which you can tell is bad news because it's all spooky colors. Every turn, one of these goes in the agenda deck, and when we match this number, we have to flip it over. Oh, these go towards the act, and these go towards the agenda, because they're mirrors of each other. I get it. Whenever you want to make a skill test in this game, you pull from this bag. Or your own bag, probably. This one's mine. I made it in my home ec class in 6th grade. In this bag, there are a bunch of these tokens with numbers. That's right, this is a game for nerds. Surprise! For example, if you want to attack a monster, there's a fight of 3, and you have a fight of 4. You hit, right? Well, not so fast. First, you have to draw a token. A -2, well, now your fight goes down from 4 to 2, which is lower than its 3, and you do no damage. And yes, almost all the tokens are negative numbers. Screw you. Oh, there's some weird tokens in here, though. These symbols do a different thing in each scenario, and this card tells us what. Sometimes they're nice, but usually they're terrible and spawn 100 evil things every time you pull them. There is this elder sign, which there's always one of in the bag and does a different thing for every investigator, but usually it's good and fuels their engine. Like Zoe's is a +1 and deals an extra damage if you pull it during an attack. Oh, maybe this game doesn't hate you. Anyway, this token's an auto-fail, and if you pull it, you fail no matter what. Screw you. Okay, here's the real game. You're in this room. Hey, it's got text on it too.
You've been investigating the strange events occurring in Arkham for several days now. Your desk is covered in newspaper articles, police reports, and witness accounts.
The door to your study has vanished.
Okay, there's 2 clues per investigator here. Hey, that's as many clues as you need to advance the act deck. Fancy that. Every investigator gets 3 actions per turn, so you spend your first turn playing all your fun assets, and maybe you also spend some actions pulling tokens out of the bag to try to pick up those clues. Maybe it works and you get a couple. Nice. This is smooth sailing. At the end of your turns, you draw a card and gain a resource. Probably you're even getting excited for your next turn, making plans in advance. Here comes your first Mythos phase to ruin the whole thing for you. First you put a Doom on the agenda deck, and then every player draws a card from this no-good, terrible deck of very bad things.
Decaying hands rise up from below and grasp and claw at your ankles.
Well, now your day is royally screwed and you have to come up with a plan to deal with all of these obstacles.
That's fine, probably you do that, and probably you even get the rest of the clues off the location. Cool. And you spend those clues to read the back of this card. There's some text. It tells you to make some changes to the game state. You found an escape to your study, and now you're in the hallway, and there are other locations in play you can move in between.
Hey, look at them incrementally introducing rules.
So now you have a new goal. You have to pick up more clues, but there's none in this room where you are, so you'll have to explore. But your turn is over now, so you gotta draw a card and gain a resource and put a doom on the agenda, and then draw your cards from the terrible, no good deck of very bad things. Wait, what is that?
A horde of cruel rats skitters forth in an undulating wave of claws, teeth, and mottled fur.
So this is an enemy, the easiest one in the whole game. It's not a big deal. You can easily punch it to death with your bare hands, even if you're not great at combat. You know, like how a swarm of rats is easy to kill with your bare hands in real life. This number here is the test you need to beat to attack it, this is its hit points, and this is the test you need to beat to evade it, which is sometimes helpful for mechanical bonuses, but mostly is just a universally less effective way of dealing with an enemy. Down here we have how much damage it deals, which is just 1, and how much horror it deals, which is none, because rats aren't actually scary, they're adorable, and just a little bit smelly. When you draw an enemy, it spawns in your location, but when an enemy is at the same location as an investigator, it automatically engages that investigator, unless the enemy has the aloof keyword, in which case it takes an action to engage it, and when an enemy is engaged with an investigator, it'll attack the investigator during the enemy phase of the round, as well as making an attack of opportunity against that investigator whenever they take an action other than fighting, evading, parleying, or resigning.
Does this feel overly complicated?
Well, don't worry, the game comes with this 18,000 word long rules reference book to help you out with any weird edge case scenarios that inevitably come up. Not sure when you're allowed to play a card with a fast keyword? Just look up the word fast and read.
Fast is a keyword ability. A fast card does not cost an action to be played, and is not played using the play action. A fast event card may be played from a player's hand if the instructions specify a win/after timing point. The card may be played as both a win/after timing point and a duration or period of time. Specify a duration or period of time. They do not specify played during any player within that attack of opportunity on page 5.
Wow, I can't imagine anyone having trouble with this game.
Okay, so the game is pretty complicated, I will grant you, and that can make getting started a little intimidating. So let me try to explain what some of that complexity is used for. So we've just spawned this rat in our location, and it will immediately jump on one of our investigators. Probably we'll choose Zoe because she's the best at killing things. But now we draw this ghoul, and we could put it on Zoe also. But Zoe just drew her gun and hasn't played it yet, so she can only do 1 damage per punch. If we put it on Zoe, she could spend all 3 of her actions punching, and she would probably kill both monsters and get some resources for her troubles. But we could also put the ghoul on Daisy, and then have Zoe use her first action to punch the rats, her second action to play her gun, and her third action to shoot the ghoul, killing it immediately. It's a play that leaves her with a weapon out that she didn't have before, but since the ghoul is engaged with Daisy, if she tries to shoot and pulls an auto-fail, she'll miss and hit Daisy instead. And then Daisy still has the ghoul on her. How much do you want to push your luck?
See, Arkham Horror is a game about taking risks and pushing your luck. One where you get dozens, even hundreds of choices every game to try to gently push your odds one way or the other. Do you discard this card right now to take you from a 4 to a 5 on this test? Or do you save that for a more important test later on? And this works because the game is completely transparent with you about your odds. You know what the board state is, you know what the test you need to make is, and you know exactly what tokens are in that bag. And unlike something like Magic the Gathering, there are always at least 4 ways you can go about solving a problem. So it's up to you to weigh risks, rewards, and opportunity costs. By itself, this is nothing special. Plenty of games involve pushing your luck and playing with odds. But where Arkham excels is by applying a lot of pressure from all sides to make those draws feel really important and make taking those risks feel sometimes worth doing. You have damage piling up, you have horror piling up, you have monsters crowding around, and no matter what happens, that doom threshold is ticking away, making sure that you only have a maximum possible number of turns to play this game in. Tick, tock. And with pressure mounting like that on all sides, sometimes you go in on one of those risky pulls, and it feels terrifying, but when you pull it off, it feels incredible. The thing that Arkham is second best at is putting 1,000 problems on the board and telling you to figure out solutions to all of them. The thing that Arkham is the best at is putting you a hair's breadth away from defeat before letting you slip through at the final moment.
I want to take a quick aside to return to the art again, because it's not just the player cards. The rest of the art is beautiful as well, if somewhat more, macabre. Like, look at this card's art. You see this card? I hate this card. This is the most annoying card in the entire goddamn game, but look how pretty it is. Honestly, if they sold this game with tarot-sized cards, I would upsize my table and repurchase the entire collection in a heartbeat.
The flavor and mechanics in this game are also often married in really delightful ways. I don't want to spoil too much from the later cycles, but there's this moment in the Path to Carcosa cycle when you're investigating a theater where there's this evil mind virus play featuring a man wearing this tattered cloak. And there's a location there, backstage, where you can find the cloak. And while you're there, you can spend 3 actions to heal 2 horror. And the game doesn't say that you're putting on the cloak when you do that, but you're definitely putting on the cloak when you do that. The game is excellent at suggesting theme through mechanics.
We'll get more into the flavor of the other cycles a little later, but the scenarios in the core box are all pretty generic ghouls eating people, evil cult sort of business, because the cards they put in the core box will be reused in every subsequent expansion, so they have to make them sort of universal. It's fun for what it is, but mostly what it is just setting the stage for future campaigns to get weird. Anyway, you figure out how to deal with all these monsters and you go exploring for clues. Chilling cold or rotting meat? Zoe's got a big butcher's knife. She's probably excited about that meat. Let's go upstairs.
The bloody carcass of a malformed beast swings from a meat hook chained to the ceiling. Blood drains slowly from the carcass, dripping into a small barrel.
Oh, and we take a horror. That makes sense. End of your turn, you draw a card and gain a resource. Doom goes to 3, meaning the agenda deck advances. You look at the back. There's some text. It tells you to do some stuff. It's bad and spooky. You spend a few more turns investigating. At some point, this guy shows up.
A monstrous creature feeds from the rotting carcass in the attic.
Good thing Zoe has that gun. Probably you explore the cellar eventually.
Your cellar seems to have been replaced with an underground network of icy tunnels and caverns. The cold chills you to the core.
Oh, and at some point this lovely lady spawns.
Inside the tunnels beneath the house, a massive beast tears its way out of the ice. It is covered in a thick layer of frost, its breath visible in the bitter cold.
Shame Zoe used all her bullets already. So they mess up your day for a while, but eventually you pick up all the clues you need, so you advance the act. You look at the back. There's some text. It tells you to do some stuff. You reveal the parlor, and there's this woman there who will help you fight monsters if you can convince her to come with you. Oh, good. Unfortunately, this enormous ghoul with a wicked deer persona spawns as well and tries to kill you. Oh, darn. You spend some time trying to deal with that, and the agenda probably advances. You look at the back. There's some text. It tells you to do some stuff. Now all the ghouls are running towards you, and the doom is going to go up even faster as long as they're there. So you're almost out of health, and you're getting swarmed, and you only have one more turn before the doom runs out, but you've come up with a plan. If Daisy uses a shortcut on Zoe to move her into the parlor, then Daisy's actions can be 1, move to the parlor, 2, parlay with Lita to take control of her to boost Zoe's damage, and 3, engage the other ghoul on Daisy so that Zoe is only engaged with the ghoul priest so her machete deals more damage. So with only one more skill test for Daisy, you may as well commit all the intellect commits you have left to get you an auto-fail only test. Perfect. Now Zoe just has to hit the ghoul priest 3 times at -2 or better, and if she misses any of them, you lose. Pulling 1. Two. Nice! The ghoul priest falls. Hooray! It tells us that means we get the second resolution, so now we get to read the part in the book it told us not to read until we finish the scenario.
And it says, let's see here, story, lead investigator must decide, wait, campaign log? Experience. Proceed to scenario 2? This is a campaign? Alright, buckle up because this is the real game. Arkham Horror is primarily played in campaign mode on one of a number of different campaigns. In the core box, there are 3 scenarios in the campaign, but most of the campaigns are 8 scenarios long. Each campaign has its own story, unique assets, mechanics, even its own setting, although they all do return at some point to Arkham, Massachusetts. In between each scenario, you get a few experience points which you can use to upgrade your deck in ways we will get into later. During and after each scenario, certain decisions you make and results you get will ask you to record information in your campaign log. And at other points during scenarios, they will ask you to reference information in your campaign log. This allows them to check whether or not you've done something at a previous point, or whether you made a previous choice. This allows the choices and results of your first scenario to have lasting repercussions that can follow you into scenario 8. Not to mention the effects on the characters themselves. Every time they're defeated, they're not necessarily killed, but they do take trauma, which means that they start every subsequent scenario with 1 damage or horror on them. Each campaign also has its own set of encounter decks, which come back over and over. So, for example, the rats in this scenario are only in the first scenario, but the ghouls come back in scenario 3. And there are a lot of cards that recur in this way in each campaign. So this gives them all a sense of internal consistency. Not only do you have the same enemies spawning over and over, but you also have the same threats, obstacles, traps, and abstract nightmares. So if you're playing the gay vampire campaign, for example, it's not just that you keep spawning vampires over and over, it's that you're facing the same cards about blood loss, and about trying to resist the vampire's hypnotic pull, and about nearby animals listening to you a little too closely. You'll notice that I don't have examples to show you for this one, because they haven't made a gay vampire campaign yet.
So this is the second scenario. It's called the Midnight Masks because most scenarios have vague and unhelpful titles designed to be more spooky than to remind you which of the 45 plus scenarios they are. You're running around Arkham in this one trying to find some cultists to interrogate about their spooky cult business. You want to defeat as many of them as possible, but the way you spawn them is by spending clues. Oh cool, because they're changing the broad goals by keeping the moment-to-moment goal of gathering clues the same. I get it. It says that there's 6 unique cultists, but there's only 5 of them in the cards you actually set aside at the beginning of the scenario. That's weird. Oh well, you do some setup and start your running around picking up clues, and once you have enough of them...
The undertaker in the local graveyard has been digging strange tunnels underneath the mausoleum.
So now you have 2 goals, and Zoe runs over to kill your cultist while Daisy picks up more clues. The problem is, you keep spawning these non-unique cultists who don't get you anything and keep putting doom on themselves because apparently you can do that, which is thematic as hell for them, but also super annoying. So really, you have 3 jobs to do at once, and before Zoe is done killing 1 unique cultist, you're already ready to spawn another one.
Oliver Thomas, the proprietor of the Curiosity Shop, has informed you that a new client has taken a keen interest in a mysterious mask.
There's a lot of doom happening here, and maybe you're not perfect at keeping it all contained, and this card keeps pushing it forward, so eventually you have enough doom to advance, so you flip it over. There's some what is that? What is that? What is that? That's the 6th cultist? That's the 6th cultist? It's on the back of the agenda card? What the heck? That's so cool. I didn't know they were allowed to do that. Jesus. That really opens up the door, doesn't it? There could be locations here, or player cards, or anything. I don't know.
This right here is the moment when this game first really experimented with its form. I know people who got hooked on it this moment, right here. Again, hi Walker. But it only gets weirder and more experimental from here. So every scenario in this game is its own little puzzle with its own unique paths to victory. And the further you get in the chronology of the game, the weirder and more out there the design gets. This is one of the core strengths of the game, that when they were building it in the beginning, they built it with the ground up to have as much space for variability and iteration as they possibly could. And the results are truly a mind-boggling amount of variation in scenario design. Every design element was designed with this in mind.
Want 30 card decks? Instead of standardizing that across the board, just make each investigator have a custom deck size of 30 in case we want exceptions later. Want to make drawing these tokens a central part of the game? Add some weird ones in there which you can change at every scenario to do whatever you want, and put in one that changes for each investigator too, just for fun. Want to leave your options open for tagging cards? Put hundreds of tags on everything, even if most of them don't even do anything yet.
My favorite example of this is at the beginning of the Forgotten Age, when there's a moment when it tells you that if any investigator has chosen Ursula Downs, Leo Anderson, or Monterey Jack, you have to choose them as your lead investigator. But they haven't printed a Monterey Jack investigator yet. They just put that in in case they want to add him later. So what this results in is a bunch of different scenarios which are all wildly different from each other.
You're building a maze with locations. Wait, the rats are scary now? Cycle through the act deck 100 times. Oops, all parlays. Reshuffle the map over and over. Just one big monster. Why does your mom let you have 2 encounter decks? Why does your mom let you have 2 agenda decks? Why does your mom let you have 3 act decks? This one's just pandemic. Can't spoil this one, but it sure is weird.
This means that every campaign is 8 different puzzles to solve, which keeps replayability and variety of type way, way up. You could play a different scenario of this game every day for a month and not even make it through the 4 finished campaigns. And in that example, every day you would be encountering some wild new mechanical ideas. Every single scenario, you can just feel the designers crawling around in their design space, tinkering with things. It's really, really fun to watch it happen. And that idea is fractal. It applies at all levels of design. So like each scenario has different mechanics, but so does each campaign. And so do most of the player card types. Like they keep introducing new mechanics to the cards. Like recently they introduced this tag Myriad. And all that Myriad means is that you can have 3 copies of this card in your deck instead of 2. And like that sounds like something that you couldn't actually do that much with in design space, right? But it turns out there is so much you can do with that.
You put this card on your location, and locations with this card are connected to one another. With just 2 of these in a deck, it'd never be worth using, but 3? This card gets better with each other copy of it in your discard. This card becomes powerful only if all 3 copies are in play at once.
Can you see how just a very small mechanical change, letting them have 3 cards instead of 2, leads for such fertile growth for all of these different experiments? Imagine that, but for every single element of the game.
Okay, so there's this new man and a bunch of cultists. You grab and defeat as many of them as you can, maybe 3, who knows. Time is running out, so either you all resign or the last agenda advances on Doom. You get some experience points and upgrade your decks and get ready for the 3rd and final scenario. You're in the woods, only they're spooky. There's some people chanting like something evil's going on. You look for some clues and put the site of the ritual into play. Some big cultist boys jump on you. Maybe you disrupt the ritual, but probably not. Hey look, an Elder God. Damn. Maybe you managed to stab the Elder God to death with your knife. Maybe not. Guess you'll have to actually play the game to find out.
Then you get to read a little resolution saying how it all turned out. If you survived and saved the world, then probably you get a whole bunch of XP, so that, you can choose to take these decks forward into another campaign if you want to. You also probably get a bunch of traumas to make sure it is under no circumstances a good idea to take these decks forward into another campaign, even if you want to. And that's pretty much how that campaign works. You get a result, and then it tells you what happens, and you write a little note in your campaign log. Oh. Have we not yet talked about the campaign log?
This is my campaign log. There are many like it, but this one is mine. Inside the campaign log, you'll be asked to occasionally write down certain results from the scenario. Like, if you're playing a scenario where you're trying to figure out who took the cookie from the cookie jar and you pull it off, it might have you write something like, the culprit was brought to justice. And then later, another scenario might have a card which tells you, check your campaign log, if the culprit was brought to justice, and then it'll tell you to do some in-game effect.
This gives the game a way of bringing you to account for your decisions and your actions later down the line. It also makes these decisions feel momentous. If the game tells you to write down in your campaign log the investigators failed to save the students, you don't know how that's going to come up later, but you're pretty sure it's gonna. Just the act of writing it in that book makes it feel momentous and weighty. It's also possible for the campaign log to have more sophisticated uses. It's a blank piece of paper. They can have you write whatever they want in it. In the Forgotten Age, they have you record a number of tally marks next to a section called Yig's Fury to represent how angry you've made the daddy of snakes. And then certain in-game effects will be based on how many tallies are next to that. In the Dream Eaters, you have 2 parallel campaign logs which play out next to each other. Some cards, like Strange Solution, will tell you to, hey, it's that card. It's telling you to put things in your campaign log. It's so weird and frustrating that we're not gonna know what is up with that card because it's never gonna come up again. You're not required to write all of your campaign notes in one book. I like doing it. You can also keep it on spare pieces of paper or on your phone. I just like keeping a record of everything that I've had before. It's cool to me. And it lets you do a lot of cool decorative stuff if you want to. Like you can maybe, like, I don't know, doodle the yellow sign on it everywhere. I don't know, you do whatever you. At time of recording, there are 5 campaigns in the game, not counting Night of the Zealot, the one I just walked you through. If it's not too much, briefly, I would like to talk to you a little bit about each one of them.
The Dunwich Legacy is the sequel to the Lovecraft short story The Dunwich Horror, which is fine. It's a very straightforward campaign, it has monsters and mysteries, and it pulls very few true surprises. It's like a cheeseburger, you know exactly what you're getting. It's arguably the ideal first campaign to play, which is handy because in my opinion it has all the most essential player cards. The Dunwich Legacy was the first campaign I ever played, and Scenario 5 is what sold me on this game forever. It really convinced me that this game was capable of selling consequence like no other tabletop I had ever played. This campaign contains monsters, thralls, and these cute little birds that hunger for death. The Path to Carcosa is based on the King in Yellow mythos, primarily Robert Chambers. The King in Yellow is a spooky play where when you watch it, it gets stuck in your head and you can't stop drawing this spooky sign. In Path to Carcosa, you watch the play, and then spooky things begin to happen around you, and it's up to you to determine how many of these things are real and how many are in your mind. It's an old idea in horror, but this campaign has a really refreshing way of representing it, which you just couldn't do in a non-interactive medium. Path to Carcosa is, to me, easily the best campaign in the game. The flavor is consistently elevated and mesh with the mechanics especially well, and the mechanical stuff is neat too. I love the dinner party. The campaign contains terrifying visions, vermin and filth, and maniacs. Oh boy, we're gonna have to talk about this game's treatment of mental health later. The Forgotten Age is...
God damn it, I don't want to talk about the Forgotten Age!
The Circle Undone is about a coven of witches courting Azathoth, an evil hot fuzz cult courting Azathoth, and you trying desperately not to court Azathoth. It is a very gothic horror vibe, and there are a lot of ghosts running around. This campaign is where it starts getting really complicated and involved, even more than it already was. It's a little harder than the two I've already talked about, and it can be a little overwhelming with more than a few recurring villains to contend with. But for my part, I find the interesting things they do remarkably compelling, especially that thing with a prologue. Oh my god, that ends up being cool. Plus, it has witches, and who doesn't love witches? This campaign contains wicked humans, wicked music, and wicked fog. The Dream Eaters, as yet unfinished at time of recording, is 2 separate 4-scenario campaigns which interact with one another. So you could play 2 groups on other sides of the country, and your games could interact with one another. One campaign involves a group of investigators traveling through the dreamland for some reason, and the other involves some investigators who are awake while spider things happen. I'm going to be honest, I haven't played this one because it's not done yet. This is one of the parts of the video that's going to be super dated in a year. I don't know what all the campaign contains, but I do know there will be spiders and whatever a zoog is.
In January of 2018, Fantasy Flight Games announced Return to the Night of the Zealot, an expansion remixing and adding new content to the Night of the Zealot, the 3-part campaign that I just walked you through. They have since also released Return to the Dunwich Legacy and Return to Path to Carcosa, remixing those campaigns as well. This has new player cards, new encounter cards, even some new locations and enemies. This serves to add extra replayability to these games, as well as just making some cool new things that they thought of in the intervening time. We don't know for sure that they're going to create return to packs for all of their campaigns, but it has been established as a pattern. I like watching as the sun goes down while I'm recording this because I'm like taking so long and it's just getting more and more ominous. Maybe I'll light a candle later. Transitions are hard. Let's talk about upgrading decks. Okay, so all of that came before is really cool, and it really, really is. But this is the real game. So after each scenario, you come out with a number of victory points, which you can spend upgrading your cards. There are a few ways to get victory points, but the most common two are either defeating an enemy that's worth victory, or having a location that's worth victory have no clues on it at the end of the game. These are either enemies that are difficult to kill or locations that are difficult to clear, and they are already pretty few and far between. So it's pretty rare to come out of a scenario with more than a few victory points. I would say my median is probably around 5 with a margin of error of like 3. Between scenarios, you get to spend victory points to make changes to your deck. A few cards have to stay in, like your weakness has to stay in, but most cards can be replaced with other, better, cooler cards. This essentially doubles the card pool that you have to choose from when building your deck. Wait, there's more of these things?
It always points where you don't want to go.
That was my favorite hat!
Each upgraded card has some dots up here which denote how many victory points you need to buy them. Some are as few as 1 point, some as many as 8. A few cards are upgraded versions of starter cards with stronger or additional effects or costing fewer resources or better in any other number of ways, but most are just wholly original cards with brand new effects.
After you've done this once or twice, this also forces you to start thinking about these upgraded cards ahead of time when you're building your deck in the first place, before you even have access to these cards so that you can plan around them. You're allowed to switch out level 0 cards for other level level 0 cards, but it still costs 1 XP to do that. It always costs 1 XP to switch out cards no matter what, so it's not usually worth it.
So if I have a level 3 Shriveling and I swap it out for a level 5 Shriveling, it only costs me 2 XP. This is called upgrading. So if we look at the Strange Solution Acidic Eye Core, it says that it can only be placed in your deck by upgrading it from the untranslated version of Strange Solution, and only if it says you identified the solution in your campaign log.
Oh, that's really cool, actually. Okay, I need you to understand how goddamn cool upgrading your deck is and how good it feels to do it. I'm already a mark for watching numbers go up. I've been playing the same game of Cookie Clicker for almost 3 years. And there is something really like primally satisfying about watching your deck just get objectively better. But it's a much more satisfying alchemy of ingredients than just that. There's a lot of things happening there. It feels like getting rewarded for the risks you took and the smart plays you made. It feels like getting an edge up on this game that's been kicking your teeth in for hours up to this moment. It feels like finally watching the plan you had when you first made this deck come together. But more than any of those things, it's about fantasizing about how your deck is about to behave. For a horror game, it is a surprisingly empowering moment. But the real appeal is in fantasizing about what your deck is about to be able to do. From the moment you put this responsible adult in your deck, you think, she's really going to help me out. I can't wait to see how cool my deck is going to be now. I can't wait to see how much I'm going to totally destroy this next scenario. And this is the dynamic that I feel like keeps people coming back to this game and thinking about it in their downtime, even when they're not playing. Sure, it destroyed you last time, but you have that responsible adult in your party now. She could change everything for you. I bet next scenario, you're going to do great. And the best part is that you do get to see her in play next time, and she does totally help you. And, of course, the scenarios are designed to get a little bit harder each time over the course of the campaign so that it doesn't ever break the game, but it helps you outsmart the game around a few corners. And it's that kind of strategic advantage that also enables my favorite card in the game. Alright, we're talking about Delves Too Deep. I'm going to light a candle. Come on, there we go. It's spooky time now. Do you like my Diana Stanley cosplay? Delves Too Deep is a masterclass in game design, and whoever designed it is going directly to hell, where I will be waiting to marry them.
Delve Too Deep is a level 0 Mystic event which costs 1 resource and makes every investigator draw 1 card from the terrible no-good deck of very bad things. Why would anyone ever play this card? Because if you survive playing it, it goes in the victory display, where it's worth 1 victory point at the end of the game. I play 2 copies of this card in every deck I can, because the idea of getting just 1 victory point is so enticing that it's usually worth screwing over the whole team and causing a permanent rift in all of my friendships at the table.
The thing about Delve Too Deep, though, is that it's a card that only makes sense to play if you're already doing really well, or if you're close enough to the end that you think you can risk some things going wrong. So, if you're doing just fantastic and just sliding on through, the game has provided you with an opportunity to volunteer to make the game a closer shave for yourself. If you're already pulling by the skin of your teeth, which remember is what the game wants for you, then there's no reason to use Delve. But if you're doing great, if you're feeling confident, well, it's just sitting there in your hands. Don't you want that victory point? Come on. Make things a little bit tighter for yourself. The game gives you a tool to make sure that you're having the kind of tight gameplay it wants you to have, and it doesn't even have any skill commits. So once you draw it, it's in your hand until something makes you discard it, or you play it. Delve Too Deep is the most visible example of this design philosophy, but you can see it scattered throughout the rest of the game too. That's most of what the rest of victory points are there for. If you're doing well, maybe you chase down that victory point monster. Maybe you spend a few more actions clearing off this victory point location when, you know, it's not strictly necessary to the scenario. A lot of seeker cards, like the Unidentified Solution that we looked at earlier, allow you to take some extra actions and some extra time trying to detranslate them so that you can include upgrades in your decks later on. There's another purple card, another Mystic card that, Drawn to the Flame, it does a similar thing. A lot of Survivor cards let you make tests harder for yourself for a benefit. the game really likes letting you volunteer to increase your own difficulty. I hope that by this point I've at least convinced you that the game is worth taking a look at, and so now it's time to let myself indulge myself a little bit. There are a few dozen investigators in the game at this point, so it would take too much time to go through all of them. So just so that you can get a sense of the variety of investigator types in this game, I'm going to just go over a few of my favorites for you briefly.
Not counting Norman or Silas, there are currently 32 investigators available to play in the game, and I will be introducing you to a couple of them from each faction so that you can get an idea of the variety in investigator abilities. I'll be introducing them all in girl mode, and you will have to get the game yourself if you want them in boy mode. I refuse to help you there. So Guardians. Rosalind Banks, the Fed, my wife, splashes Seeker and discovers a clue every time she kills an enemy. She's one of the best single-player investigators in the game because she can handle both enemies and clue gathering. She's already good at killing, but you can see how she's leaning into a get clues without having to test for it archetype, which is common on Guardian cards. Her story is about going rogue from the agency when being lawful doesn't help her cope with the seeing spooky eldritch content. Zoe Samaras, the chef, my wife, gets a resource every time she engages with an enemy so she can afford all the nicest guns. She's one of the most straightforward murder machines in the whole game, and I always want to play her. Her playstyle is about chasing down enemies as much as possible and then buying very, very nice things to kill them with. And drawing aggro is practically in the name Guardian. Her story is about hearing voices from God telling her to strike down evil, except the voices really do just point to evil, so it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Seekers. Daisy Walker, the librarian, my wife, splashes mystic and is very good at reading books, many of which are magic. A lot of books in this game are only good for her, but rule for her. This plays into the forbidden knowledge theming Seekers have, but also makes her really want to build into the card draw options Seekers have in plenty. Her story is just that she read the Necronomicon and was like, oh damn, this is so cool, I should find more of these, like a true chaotic librarian lesbian hero. Ursula Downs, the Explorer, my wife, gets to take a free investigate action when she moves once per turn. Her deck building options aren't ideal, but her ability is absolutely incredible. She really likes the relic archetypes Seeker have, and she really likes the mobility cards in Seeker. Her story is maybe my favorite in the whole game. There's nothing spooky at all in it. It's just she's a woman excelling in a male-dominated field in the 1920s. That's it. Iconic. Mystics. Mother Matea, the priestess, my wife, gets to ignore one auto-fail per game and starts with 5 XP. Doesn't do much on her own, but boy is it nice to have her on your team to keep you safe. I love playing her two-handed. She takes a lot of advantage of purple bag control dynamics, and it's neat that her ability set kind of makes her feel like she's inspiring divine miracles to happen. Her story is about being a priest in Mexico and having a crisis of faith when spooky things happen, and yeah, I can totally see how seeing incontrovertible proof of elder gods would do that. Huh. Diana Stanley, the reformed cultist, my wife, splashes Guardian, likes to cancel things but isn't great at much until she does. She's a pretty combat and control-focused mystic, and come on, how can you not love playing a reformed cultist? She leans into the encounter deck control abilities of both Mystic and Guardian and finds a really neat synergy between the two. Her story is mostly about how the local cult is terrible at vetting its new recruits to make sure they're actually evil before showing them the evil rituals. Survivors. Calliope Wright, the Haunted, my wife, starts with all of her stats at 0 and gets +1 on them for each damage and horror she takes. She's so goddamn fun to play. It's super weird going out of your way to take damage and horror, really leans into the survivors intentionally failing up mechanics and their healing and soak options. I mostly can't actually parse what her story is about, but in the original card she was canonically queer according to the text and has a whole protecting his boyfriend thing going on, which like, hell yeah. Rita Young, the athlete, my wife, gets to heal damage and move every time she evades, which she's great at. Really great combat character, totally changes how you play the game. Survivors have a lot of evasion cards, and I would never imagine running them on anyone but her. Her story is that she's getting chased by, not the KKK, but I mean, come on, but they can't catch her because she's too fast. Rogues. Safina Rousseau, the painter, my wife, splashes Mystic, starts with an extra big hand, and has a set of events tucked away she can draw whenever. She's kind of weird, and I like her. It's very easy for me to ignore events, but her playstyle lets you play events over and over, which for rogues means making just so much goddamn money. Her story is all about making forgeries, and at some point... Wait, she does magic paintings? I love magic paintings. Why does this game not have more magic paintings? Priscilla Fairmont, the millionaire, my wife, splashes Survivor and has terrible stats but gains 4 resources every turn she can only use that turn. Okay, I know I said rich people are bad, but Priscilla is, to me, maybe the most fun and interesting character in the entire game, but there is so much you can do with her. Like, you can tap into the Survivor failing at a benefit archetype, the Survivor spend all your money for a benefit archetype, the Rogue spend all your money for a benefit archetype, the Rogue save all your money and then get a bonus for all the money you have archetype, the Rogue succeed by 2 or more archetype, or all of them at the same time. It's also worth mentioning Lola Hayes, the actress, is the only neutral investigator in the game so far. She takes cards from any faction and changes roles every turn back and forth between them. She's not necessarily especially good, but she sure is neat.
I hope you can see how playing each of these investigators provides a totally different experience. So you have all of that variety that I talked about earlier with the scenarios on one level, but then stacked on top of that, There's also all of this variety from investigators. You could play the same scenario with dozens of different investigators, dozens of different times, and never have the same experience twice. This makes the game's versatility... It's big! It's big! Each faction has its own engines and archetypes, and that's what each of these investigators is built on. So I'm going to talk you real quick through like some of the most common engines found in each faction.
Guardians have a lot of weapon and damage cards, but they also have a lot of cards which, for an amount of money or the right circumstances, let up pick up free clues or do free damage. They also sort of have encounter deck control engines and ammo control engines just barely right on the edge of existing. They make a lot of money, have cards which cost a lot of money, and get bonuses for taking a lot of damage and drawing a lot of fire. Seekers are mostly good at picking up 1,000 clues at once, but they're also good at drawing a lot of cards and have a lot of cards which get better the more cards they have. They also have mobility options to let them and allies move around a lot. There's also a burgeoning search the deck archetype for Seekers. Mystics have a lot of cards that let them make tests with willpower instead of the normal skill. They have a few cards that let them seal tokens from the bag onto their cards so they can't be drawn, and a lot of cards which have different effects based on drawing special symbols from the Chaos bag. They also have cards which make it more or less likely to draw those symbols. See how that combos? They also have a lot of cards about putting Doom on cards and removing Doom from cards, taking horror and healing horror, and casting and finding spells. Survivors are the second most engine-heavy faction. They have a lot of cards which get discarded quickly, cards which give them bonuses for discarding other cards, and a lot of cards which help them retrieve cards from the discard pile. They have cards which make it harder to succeed, cards which give them bonuses for failing, and cards which help them scrape by with a near failure. They have cards which give them bonuses for not having money, and cards which help them burn through a lot of money. Rogues are the most engine-heavy faction, but in many ways the opposite of survivors. They have cards which let them gain a lot of resources and cards which let them spend lots of resources. They have cards which give them lots of very nice things if they succeed by 2 or more, and cards which help them do that. They have a lot of cards which give them extra actions, and cards which give them extra resources the more actions they've spent, and then cards which let them put all of their resources into skill tests to get to succeed by a ridiculous amount so they can use their skill card to draw a bunch of cards so they can have everything they need in their hand to play this, which lets them draw more cards and gain more resources. And
so you can see with all these engines present how playing a game once you have a firm grasp of all the moving pieces could be a completely different experience than when you played it for the first time. At a certain level, it's not just about choosing all the best cards, although if you have a chance to take lucky and don't, what are you doing? It's about turning your deck into a perfect, ruthless, well-oiled combo machine, capable of dispatching any level it comes across with ruthless efficiency. Oh, god damn it, not that one. I don't know that I would even consider myself at high-level play. I think that that probably demands a lot more numbers crunching than I think that I'm really usually prepared to do. So it's kind of nice, right, to know that the skill threshold for this game is higher than I am, and higher than I'm even likely to go. That there's no way I'm going to ever solve this game. And that's encouraging in the best of scenarios, but it has the added bonus of being a cooperative game, so there's no one you're competing with to get better. You get as good and as involved in this game as you want to be. And if you want to hone your skills, I mean, there are a lot of places to do it.
Special. Call me crazy, call me slow. Got my own cilantro mixture. Watch me roll and watch me go. Go.
We've talked a lot about campaigns, but Arkham has a variety of types of play. Have a friend who's just visiting town for one day and really wants to try this game that you've been screaming about for months? Try a standalone. Every scenario in the game can be played standalone without any of the context of the surrounding campaign to go with, and they each come with rules on how to do that. So you can just show your friends your favorite scenario if you want to. Mine is Threads of Fate, but I don't actually recommend that as a person's first standalone. But there are also a number of scenarios that are specifically designed to be standalone-only scenarios that don't have an associated campaign.
Curse of the Rougarou is about a werewolf in the bayou that you're trying to either kill or cure. Carnival of Horror is about a big party in Venice which is actually evil, and you have to save innocent people, but some of them try to kill you. Guardians of the Abyss is a 2-part standalone where you save people from falling into eternal slumber in Cairo, and Murder at the Excelsior Hotel is a murder mystery where you wake up in a hotel with blood on your hands and you have to solve the puzzle of what's going on. I also have this advanced copy of The Blob That Ate Everything, which is what it sounds like. It's really cool. Thanks, Walker. This doesn't make up for what you did.
And they just announced the joke set, The Curse of Meowlatotep, where you play as dogs fighting cats, and that's just adorable. Each standalone scenario can also be inserted into the middle of another campaign for the cost of a few experience, depending on each scenario. It's usually worth it to take them just because of the extra experience that you also get during the scenario, and also you usually get some like extra special rewards, but not always. Sometimes you just get defeated and you have to take that risk. I like to insert them into places in the campaign where it wouldn't make any story sense at all. Like, oh, you're in a really big hurry, you gotta do this thing before midnight, there's no time to lose. But we can take a quick stop to take a trip down to Louisiana and then Cairo. The coolest standalone scenarios for me, though, are the ones designed to be played by huge groups of people at a convention all together. This is the epic multiplayer scenario. There are 2 of them so far, Labyrinths of Lunacy and the Blob That Ate Everything. Labyrinths of Lunacy is designed to be played with 3 groups of up to 4 players, for a total of up to 12 players playing the same scenario at the same time. The Blob That Ate Everything can take any number of groups. These epic multiplayer events are really cool expansions of the design space, and because of the aforementioned iteration-friendly design, they don't break the game at all. I got to play Labyrinths of Lunacy once with a full 12-player group, and it was really, really cool. Walker was there. Walker, hi. You were here for all of the formative experiences for me with this game. I can't believe... Why am I doing this? Why? What is this bit? I love you. I don't know why this is... I gotta... We didn't get a great ending, but it wasn't my group's fault. I feel like when people find out that I'm so into this game, they always like volunteer to play it with me because, you know, they want to be involved in my hobbies and stuff, and it's very sweet. But it's also always a little bit odd for me because I love thinking about and talking about this game and reading about it. But when it comes to playing, I'm really happy doing it single player, and a lot of the times I even like prefer the single player multi-handed experience in the regular game. But the epic multiplayer experience, where you need all these groups, where it's about doing all of this communication and juggling all these balls that one person can't possibly do alone, that was a really unique and special experience for me that I couldn't possibly play single player. It combined all the best parts of the Arkham Horror LCG with all the best parts of an escape room. It was so cool. And what I'm saying is that if I know you in real life, and you want to drop $40 on a copy of this game so that we can play an epic multiplayer game, that would be cool. That would, you know, I'm dying over here. Obviously, this game mode is designed to be played as conventions, but you don't have to play them there. I played mine at a friendly local game store. You can play them in your own home if you can get enough people there who have copies of the game. But as long as we're talking about conventions, let's talk conventions. Arkham Nights is an annual convention that Fantasy Flight holds in Minnesota every October in order to promote their Arkham Files IP line. There are also versions of the con that occur in other countries, but I don't know as much about those because I don't know anyone who's been to them. They host games there for the Arkham Horror board game, Arkham Horror Final Hour, Eldritch Horror, Elder Sign, Mansions of Madness. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Anyway, they also hold Arkham Horror card games there for some reason. A bunch of the designers are there too, and I'm pretty sure I'm not supposed to tell you this, but the lead designer has like a special convention-only scenario that he runs, and it's supposed to be pretty cool. As a part of this tradition, every year a select group of fans are selected to form what's called a card council, and collectively they design a card which is then later play-tested and then brought into existence into the real game through a later scenario release. It goes through a series of iterations after they design it, so sometimes it comes out better than it started. It's hard to know for sure, but sometimes it doesn't always work. Like, hey, how is the 13th Vision not just haunted? I've never been to Arkham Nights or been on the card council, but I know people who have. Walker, hi. I'm so glad that you got that experience, and I hold nothing against you. See, this video has a narrative arc. It makes it feel like the community is really involved in the production of the game in a really cool way, and let's talk community. Okay, so if you're watching this, chances are either I know you in person or you found this from one of the various community sites that I've plastered this video on everywhere. So I probably didn't super convince anyone of anything here, but it does mean that you probably know that this game has a healthy community online throughout various forum sites. I don't even remember my Reddit login info, but I still check r/Arkham Horror LCG almost daily just because there's a really cool and vibrant discussion happening there with very little gatekeeping and pretty much no need to do any discourse. They have this cool card of the day feature where every day they'll post a player card and people will just like talk about it. like what investigators it's good with, like what it pairs with. It's cool, I promise. There are forums on the Fantasy Flight website and on Board Game Geek. There are web series, and there are more podcasts than you would expect there to be able to be about this subject without running out of things to talk about. And sometimes the lead designers will just like show up in places because like if you design a game and it has a subreddit with 10,000 people on it and they're making podcasts, why would you not know about every podcast that gets made? What I'm saying is Matt Newman. If you're watching this video, hi, I love your game. Thanks for liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing, which I know you're going to do. Anyway, I don't listen to the podcast and I don't watch very many of the videos, but it's cool knowing they're out there, and it's cool seeing that the community is out here doing things. I like seeing people's cool storage solutions. I like seeing the laser printer cutouts that people made for their characters as stands. But apart from all of these things, I think maybe the single coolest sort of fan expression that exists on these communities is fan-made content. People post their own content for this game all the time. Sometimes it's just things they thought would be cool. Like here, I made an investigator who's a vampire and they heal damage by dealing damage. Sometimes it's something more meaningful, like a Japanese player who created a whole series of cards that were themed around Japan to make the game more their own. And sometimes they're downright impressive. People make entire scenarios or even entire campaigns of these fan-made and then just post them online for free so that you can play them. If you have a printer and enough patience to sift through a few balance issues, you will never run out of content for this game. And yes, you guessed correctly, this is the moment when I plug my own work. What, did you think I was going to get through the whole video and never once mention it? I make investigator cards for my friends sometimes, and I post them on Twitter. You can find the link to that down there. These three are my favorites. It's amazing. You can watch me go through the designs and I get more and more competent, and I understand the game more and more as the designs get weirder and weirder. So these three, we have Elizabeth, who he gets to, as an action, seal tokens on some of his cards, but then she has 3 weaknesses in her deck where if you draw them, then you have to discard an asset that you have with tokens on it. But as long as you do have tokens on one of your assets, you get bonuses to your skills while activating an ability on that asset. It's cool. I think it's a fun extension of the push your luck sort of idea in the game, as well as the chaos token control of mystics. Alice Kira gets to take both blue and yellow cards, but can only play certain ones at certain times. Once per game, Faye gets to take an action to transform, do a magical girl transformation into the blue color, so you can play blue cards. I think it's really cool. And then McGay does a lot of playing with bonded cards and the encounter discard pile, which is really interesting, which they haven't done in the real game yet. So I'm quite proud of it. And also, like, look at this card. You see, it happens, the effects depend on whether you get like a 7 to 9 or a 10 or up, because it's Apocalypse World. It's an Apocalypse World. McGay wrote Apocalypse World. Let's move on.
If you're interested in my game design work, we just released Scherzando, which is a musical tabletop role-playing game about things going explosively wrong, in which you can play both the characters and the soundtrack. Available now. Link in the description. You can check it out if you want to.
If you're curious, the main program people use to make these is called Strange Aeons, and the main website people post them on is ArkhamCentral.com. Strange Aeons is a very robust program, but I can attest from personal experience that it takes a few hours to make an investigator, just an investigator, and that's without playtesting or balance design. So it's really impressive that people manage to put out as much content as they do. Like, it's really amazing. And, like, sure, not all of it is perfect, but, like, neither's the main game.
Special. Call your doctor, call your priest. Got my own malignant scripture and it works phenomenally.
Okay. So Lovecraft's work is deeply racist and the game does its best to scrub that. Fine. But I'm not going to just sit here and pretend like the game doesn't have a race problem. Very glad your one African character is a shaman, guys. Of the investigators from the broader Arkham Files IP, they've adapted maybe half, but they've adapted all of the characters of color except for 2. These 2. Which, proportionally speaking, does show that they are making an effort to adapt the characters of color predominantly. So, it could be worse. But the fact that it could be worse doesn't stop me from wishing that it could be better. Especially when we know that Fantasy Flight can do better. Take a look at Android Netrunner, which is another Fantasy Flight LCG. Netrunner has a number of canonically trans and non-binary characters, and has more women of color than white men which is true to the real world. There's also the mental health thing, especially in Path to Carcosa. One oddly progressive thing about Lovecraft writing is that the mental health patients were never stigmatized. Not like they were in, like, this game, for example. They were just patients. Here, they're maniacs and people who are out to kill you. It's not great. And, like, I get that especially in Path to Carcosa, it's supposed to be ambiguous whether we can actually trust our tenses, and maybe they're not actually out to get you. But even that assumption only works if you already are assuming that it's possible that these people are just crazy, and that's not great. Plus a lot of the cop worship that comes with the territory, and, like, a lot of the rampant colonialism that's just around places in the Egypt scenarios with Ursula and Luis, and with the Forgotten... I don't want to talk about the Forgotten. Let's move on. The LCG is by design more accessible than other card games, but I don't want to act like it's cheap. If you want to play just the core scenarios with 4 or 3 players, you're talking $80 just for that. Plus another $120 for each full campaign past that. If you want to get all the way caught up, we're talking $800 plus card sleeves and storage solutions and all of those things. Personally, I've played it more than enough to be absolutely worth the price of a video game console, but I can't just recommend it to people with that kind of a price tag. I have to recommend that you find a friend who already has it to play it first if you can, or try it out at a convention or a local game store if you don't. And if you like it then, if your reaction is as good as mine, then think about getting more. Plus, it's a nightmare to store and organize it. I have these 2 enormous boxes already to store my collection, and I'm not even that far away from outpacing them and needing to buy new boxes and paint the new boxes as well. And they're enormous and difficult to keep organized. I use these fan-made dividers, and they're heavy and they're difficult to lug around to conventions. There are a lot of other storage solutions that people have other than mine. I know people who swear by binders as the way to go. And I don't think it's significant enough of a problem to stop anyone from participating in the game if they want to, but I think if we're talking downsides, it's not something that's small enough that I can just leave it out. And, yeah, no, that's it. I think that's pretty much all of the downsides, which means that that's everything I had to say about this game. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. The Forgotten Age is the 3rd campaign in the Arkham horror card game. It leans more heavily than the others into a sort of a lighthearted, pulpy tone, featuring several expeditions to Mexico, the discovery of a forgotten civilization, and some time travel shenanigans. It has everything that I would expect me to love in an Arkham horror campaign. It has a fun, pulpy tone, and I love it when things have a fun, pulpy tone. It has a lot of snakes, and I am a huge fan of snakes. It has my favorite scenario, and that's my favorite scenario. And maybe it's because the adventures are more blatantly colonialist than usual, or because the snakes look bad with arms, or that my favorite scenario is followed up by the hardest scenario in the game. But the Forgotten Age is just almost never quite what I want it to be. Part of what's tough about it is that I sort of want to either love or hate the Forgotten Age. But it's neither, really. What keeps happening is that it keeps coming so close to being good, but then in the end it just sort of ends up feeling bad. Like, the supplies mechanic rules. But if you mess it up, you won't get far enough in the game to really see full use of it. And Scenario 7 is a really cool scenario, but I almost never get to it because the first 3 times I played, I lost on Scenario 6. I'm okay losing. I've lost every time I've played the final scenario of the Circle Undone, and I feel fine about it. But the Forgotten Age, it just feels mean. And yet, every time I lose to it and swear off the campaign and slink off somewhere else to nurse my wounds and do something to distract me from my disappointment, 3 weeks later, I can't get it out of my head, and I can't stop thinking about it. And thinking about the thing that killed me last time, and how I could get around it, and maybe what a better investigator would look like for that, and who could beat that campaign better. I've only beat it 1 time. I was playing on easy, and I did every single standalone in the entire game before the Boundary Beyond just to make sure I had the maximum possible number of XP going in. But I beat it. And I am so proud of that entry of that campaign log. I was never really any good at video games, so when people talked about that feeling of pride from beating a really difficult section of the game, I didn't always necessarily know what they were talking about, but I sort of have expertise in this game. And I'm not going to say that that's the main thing that draws me to this game, but it is one thing. I guess what I'm saying is that I think that Arkham Horror, the card game, is the Dark Souls of card. I've spent a lot of time playing this game, and even more time thinking about it, to the point where I made this entire video, the script for which is very nearly long enough to technically qualify as a novella. And sometimes I worry that by thinking about it so much and talking about it so much, I'm being a weirdo, or I am bothering the people around me, which I guess is part of why I made this video, is to, I guess, channel that energy into somewhere more, I don't know, focused, productive, ignorable. I suppose I am sort of a mark for this game specifically. It has a lot of things that I love in it. It has that pulpy tone. It has cosmic horror. It has deck building. It has cooperation. It has a lot of wives. It has a narrative arc where things are really tense and going poorly for most of the game, and then right at the end you pull through and it's fine. And it has really good art. These are all things that I get really excited about in a game and in general. But I don't know whether you get excited about those things. I can't speak to your subjectivity. And I guess I'm not really here to recommend it. If all of the things that I just said sound great to you, then maybe you should try it. If none of the things that I just said sound great to you, then probably you shouldn't. I can't speak to your subjectivity, and I'm not going to try to. I'm here because I love this game, and I wanted to tell you why I love this game. I think the characters are delightful and that I have a great time getting to play as them. I think that the art and design is drop-dead gorgeous. I think that building decks is just as fun as gameplay, and I think that gameplay is tense and exciting and engaging, and I love to get drawn into it to the point where I can't look away or focus on anything else. I think that it's delightful seeing them carve out a game space for themselves, and it's enchanting to see all of the cool things that they choose to do with it. I think upgrading decks is even more fun than building them. I think having the campaign log feels momentous and cool, and I love seeing what people make for this game, and it makes me feel connected to them. I'm here because I like this game, and I wanted to tell you why I like this game. And I don't need you to feel the same way. You can disagree with everything I've said in this video, that's fine. I just wanted to share a piece of myself, because that's what people do. And in a game that's so much about forces so large that they couldn't possibly care about humanity, I hope that it's worth something just to hear a human care. Thank you for watching.
What's that sound? Bang! The postman rang, said a telegram came for the Danish gang. His first-hand man's got a filament-textured brain, the cinnamon-scented fangs, the nuttiness with the tang, a little bit of grace. Historically glistening carapace, bodacious babe, get a look at her face.
Special. Call me crazy, call me slow. Got my own cilantro mixture. Watch me roll and watch me go. Go, go. Special. Call your doctor, call your priest. Got my own malignant scripture and it works phenomenally. Special. Call me crazy, call me slow. Got my own cilantro mixture. Watch me roll and watch me go. Go, go. Special. Call your doctor, call your priest. Got my own malignant scripture and it works phenomenally.
Who made the moon? That book fortuitous silver. She must have bought that shade from a market in Peru. Can't help but look at her multitudinous trinkets. I always wish that I could have that attitude. What's that sound? Slam! The door's gone down like a bellowing storm drain swallowing rounds. There's not a soul here. Telegraph fear, delicate tears, glitterific on the unwashed fears. I ask, which girl is that? She's brash like a devil of the wild outback. She's fast like a bottle of a held attack. She got cash, but a
own malignant scripture, and it works phenomenally. Special, call me crazy, call me slow. Got my own cilantro mixture, watch me roll and watch me go, go. Special, call your doctor, call your priest. Got my own malignant scripture, and it works phenomenally. Special, call me crazy, call me slow. Got my own cilantro mixture, watch me roll and watch me go, go. Special, call your doctor, call your priest. Got my own malignant scripture, and it works phenomenally. Special, call me crazy, call me slow. Got my own cilantro mixture, watch me roll and watch me go, go, go. Special, call your doctor, call your priest. Got my own malignant scripture, and it works phenomenally.
Hey, end of the video. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure to ding the bell so that you get notifications when the videos come out. And like, comment, and subscribe. Back me on Patreon. Like, comment, and subscribe. Maybe like, comment, and subscribe while you're here. You could subscribe, give us a comment, like, comment, subscribe. You know, whatever you feel like doing. Like, comment, subscribe, maybe. You know, whatever you feel like. This bit's going on too long. I'm gonna cut here.